There's nothing on this train to lose, everything to gain. 1,000 years ago, the Buddhist priest Shinto said, "No matter what road I travel, I'm going home." Perth, Fremantle, Asheville,
Honolulu,
Boulder,
New Orleans,
Barcelona,
Memphis,
Naples,
Galway,
Baltimore,
Deer Isle,
Shreveport,
Edinburgh,
Mobile,
Pompeii,
Charlotte,
Shore,
Atlanta,
Cardiff,
Tunica,
Louisville,
Washington,
Seville, Boulder
Dallas,
Beijing,
Scotland,
Hogwarts,
Oslo,
Wonderland,
Jackson,
Helena,
Lyoko,
Lisbon,
Bikini Bottom,
Sedona,
Narnia, Emerald City in the Land of Oz.
There is a need for story in all of us, to share, to receive. Story is the way we understand ourselves and others. And life story writing requires that we tell where we come from and who we are. It takes examination. It requires us to be honest and brave. The writers before you are not actors. The writing experience varies. They are different ages and come from many kinds of backgrounds, but they all have this in common. They are courageous enough to share a story of travel and transformation. Writing is a solitary task, but today these authors will give their words voice, share out loud pieces of their journeys. They will leap from the page to the stage.
There's nothing on this train to lose, everything to gain.
Amsterdam, the city of canals and heroin pushers, where you can go from the red light district to the Rijksmuseum in just a few blocks.
Ghana took me by surprise. The people were warm, genuine with their welcome without asking for anything in return. It was a place like nowhere I've been before.
Winchester, England, is known for its ancient cathedral, cobblestone streets, fairs and farmers' markets, paths that meander along the River Itchen, and is so exquisitely beautiful, it's been the home of 35 kings.
Lost in rainy Paris, a handsome Israeli paratrooper shared his map, his umbrella, and his dinner on his last night of leave. I declined to share his bed.
Broadway, New York. The glowing signs and flashing billboards. When I was younger, I thought it was Las Vegas.
I found Port-au-Prince to be a city of exotic flowers, wonderful smells, danger, with machine guns everywhere.
On a night flight from Delhi to Karachi on Pakistani International Airlines, as the engines roared in preparation for takeoff, I glanced out the window through the pouring rain and noticed the cowling supporting the engine was wrapped in duct tape. As the jet jerked and sped down the runway, the overhead bins flew open to release drums, baskets, and live chickens.
It would be difficult to tell any story without including travel, some exploration of where you've been and where you are going. Because after all, it's our journeys that make us who we are. And as John Steinbeck says in Travels with Charlie, a trip has personality, temperament, individuality, uniqueness. A journey is a person in itself, and no two are alike. What trip did you take? Did you visit your beloved grandfather's birthplace on the Isle of Skye? Have you purchased a lavender farm in Washington State's Olympic Mountains, hoping to start a simpler and sustainable life? Or do your travels follow a different path, the psychological kind? Did you come up to life's edge during a near-death experience? Did you trek over the rocky road from addiction to sobriety? Or might you be an armchair traveler, venturing into Paul Bowles' sheltering sky in French North Africa. Perhaps you've lost yourself in Van Gogh's swirly cypress landscapes, or Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Or maybe you've made expeditions into the past, digging up long-buried childhood memories. Where have you been?
My journey started before I was born. My journey is my mother's journey, my father's journey, my grandparents, and my people, all those who came before me. I traveled out into the world on my own, but with the blood of Mill Swamp running through my veins. New travelers have joined the journey. My children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchild. But memories always lead me back to Mill Swamp. I'm still trying to understand the why of it all. But like that verse in the old Negro spiritual says, we'll understand it by and by.
Travel tip. When arriving in Dublin in a once-in-a-century rainstorm, remember to pack an umbrella and to reserve a room in a hotel in advance, anywhere dry.
Travel tip. The more exotic the location, the stranger you will look, smell, and sound to everybody else.
Travel tip. Always ask the natives for the best food, the best wine, and the best doctors.
Travel tip. When trying to claim the empty seat next to you for sleeping on international flights, open the tray table and put your laptop on it, rumple up a blanket to drop in the seat, add a water bottle to make a fake person. When the flight attendants ask you if someone is sitting there, say yes, he's in the bathroom.
I have carried two unrelated visions with me for years, since childhood, helping individuals with special needs and travel. I had no idea how they might one day come together. My teaching career came first. For 10 years, I gave all of myself to working with children who had autism and other developmental disabilities. However challenging the children may have been to others, they were my calm amidst the storms of life. I loved them, yet I knew there was more. At 28 years old, I left my home in upstate New York, and the world quickly became my new home. And the more I traveled to foreign lands, the more I questioned whether there might be a greater purpose for me. How could I combine traveling and the wider perspective it gave me with a career I loved? I didn't have a plan, but somehow, wherever I went, I found them, children with special needs. They appeared in doorways, sat in corners, and lived in neighboring villas. They had autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and cognitive disabilities. They were always in my path. Now, after 10 years of travel, 5 continents, and countless planes, I know what I am traveling for. It is for them, the children.
Why do we write life stories? So that your grandson will know who you are? Know that before you became an accountant, you spent 2 years biking from Alaska to Argentina? Do you need to heal? Will you let your words unravel while you suddenly up and left your home, job, and husband to start again in Prague? Do you want to inspire that novel you hope to write? The reasons for writing are as varied as the stories. But if we view our lives as stories, a tale that propels us forward, it may help us to better comprehend life's mysteries.
Wintering ducks scatter from waters below the seawall when I run by, spooking, spooked. So have you, Lord, fled my very presence. 10 miles a day, 15. I run so I won't need bourbon, fatigue, a lighthouse guiding me through rough waves. Hell is when I cannot tire myself enough. I must go to bed sore, drunk, and waiting for the light. Okay, hell is more like an equation you study so closely it seeps into your marrow. Except in the case of hell, it's not the quadratic you're learning, but how you truly are a son of a bitch. How, if son of a bitches like yourself were desirable commodities, like copper or wheat, and there were a market devoted to dealing in them, with brokers, a stock exchange, and daily market reports, brother, you'd have it cornered. Samuel Beckett says only one of the crucified thieves was saved. Maybe I ought to stop reading Beckett. Lord, you who can, as through a veil of pine woods and drifting snow, find the me that is me, when will you begin to, gentle as wind's breath or the light of dead stars, have mercy for the guilty, mercy for the brokenhearted? When every blade offers a window onto the sunset, a friend invites me to stay in New York City as long as needed. When the bus lurches forth, a black highway stretching behind, my only company is an iPod full of Te Deums and Magnificats. And when I scroll through the playlists, the ticking in my earbuds is worrisome as a bad heart. On the subway, I hear a battered man slurring from the effort to hold his madness close. Everyone, I am fallen hard and could use any comfort you might spare. Like the rest, I turn my eyes away, thinking how vile I am for the little I've done to help lives not my own. A thought that consoles precisely because it asks me to do nothing at all. E.M. Shioran says, every book is a suicide postponed. Yeah, maybe I ought to stop reading Shioran too. At the cloisters, on a stone wall, the torso of Christ curves at the hip like a bow, the unseen arrow lodged in my heart. Even if I could disavow, Lord, my love of beauty, sacrifice it unto you, I could not help but see the lovely brow, the face more present for being lost. Dawn. Leaving the third floor walk-up, I meet a slate and white pigeon on the street, who flutters a little beyond me, but doesn't fly away. Finally, I stand beneath El Greco's vision of the opening of the fifth seal. St. John reaches to heaven, his body a candle flame trembling in the wind. The skin of the risen is bruised with shadow and flashes of white. as if lightning had just struck close by some miracle, not harmed the soul. There are two distances between us, a closeness whence you fly from me, and a vastness wherein you remain. In the interstice between dances an angel.
Grandma Eva was a quiet soul. I always wondered how she managed to hook up with Granddad. He would roar like a wild boar when he came in from the fields at lunch. "Eva, where's my lunch?" he shouted. And Grandma replied in her quiet way, I couldn't get into the meat house this morning. You took the keys with you when you went to the fields." Granddaddy stepped back as if he needed more room for his next roar and shouted again, "Eva, the hen's ass wasn't locked, was it?" But that was just their way. They loved each other. That same love seemed to spread to everyone on the farm but me. You see, I didn't live on the farm. I lived in Mill Swamp. And Mama sent me to the farm every summer for short visits. Yet Granddaddy always had a facial expression tied up in a vice when he looked at me. How could he love Mama so much and not me? What did I ever do to him? His look stung me something fierce. Cousin Cindy said it was because Mama had left the farm with Daddy soon after I was born. Cindy told me, "I overheard Granddaddy talking to Grandma. He said your Mama never should have left the farm, even if she was in the family way." Grandma always cooked salt fish on Sunday mornings. She put other things on the table as well, like scrambled turkey eggs, fried eel, turtle, coon, possum, rabbit, and squirrel. I often wondered if they ever ate any normal food. I always filled up on the buttermilk biscuits when something looked too strange. Granddaddy was the only one who ate the saltfish. No one else could tolerate those salted herrings with a zillion bones. Grandma would poach those rascals, and those salted herrings laid out on a platter looked like they were fit for the king. But the look was deceiving. It took great skill to tackle that many fish bones. Well, one Sunday I decided to eat saltfish with Granddaddy. I figured if I ate the saltfish, Granddaddy would like me more. I actually liked it. Sure, the bones were tricky, but the taste appealed to me. Granddaddy spied me from the corner of his eye. He pretended not to notice. It didn't really matter. I couldn't wait to tell Mama what I had eaten. Suddenly I started to choke. A fish bone was lodged in my throat. I was gonna die on the farm. I would never see Mama or Papa again. The pain was sharp, and I started to panic. Was no one gonna help me? Suddenly, Granddaddy was out of his chair and pushing his huge, callous hand down my throat. "Can't reach it," he said calmly, like a surgeon pondering his options. "Cindy," he said, "throw me a biscuit." Cindy, and I fielded for the Sands Rose Nuggets, threw the biscuit from the far end of the massive kitchen table, and it landed precisely in Granddaddy's hand. Granddaddy proceeded to ram those pieces of biscuit down my throat. I felt a big gulp. The fishbone went down. I looked at my grandfather with gratitude. He smiled and asked, "All right, honey?" It was then that I knew he loved me.
Travel tip. In a strange locale, a smile goes a long way.
Travel tip. When traveling with small children in a car, bring board games, a stash of Reese's Pieces, and barf bags for them. And for yourself, noise-canceling headphones, a sense of humor, and a sense of wonder.
Travel tip. On international flights, always take the wine. Forget that bit about alcohol making it harder to sleep.
Whether you have traveled to Bora Bora or Boise, it's the people who make the adventure memorable, the people who make our stories matter, who burrow deep into our hearts and recollections. And it's the people who make us recognize our place of belonging. Sometimes that place is far different from what we ever imagined.
I have been very fortunate to travel to places outside of my country and state with my family. I've been to Ireland, where I've kissed the Blarney Stone. I've been whitewater rafting in the Grand Canyon. I've seen both Hollywood glamour and wild black bears feasting on salmon in Alaska. I've seen Native American pueblos in New Mexico. And I've walked the beaches of the Bahamas, Belize, Hawaii, and Florida. For my age, I've seen a lot. I've also learned that you don't need to go to exotic or faraway lands to experience a life-changing moment. It was September 2010. I was 13. My 7th grade class was studying the environmental impact of runoff in the Chesapeake Bay. To highlight these lessons, we traveled to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's educational facility on Smith Island for 3 days. Smith Island has been sinking for 150 years, and the remaining 240 residents, mostly working watermen, live in 3 villages spread out across the island. It is said that they still speak with the Elizabethan accents of their ancestors. I wasn't that excited about the trip. I was just going along with the plan. In those days, I was more interested in becoming popular. I was obsessed with it, so much so that I was ignoring true friends and trying to hang out with the popular people. This wasn't going well because the popular kids didn't notice me, and when they did, it wasn't pleasant. So on the 4-hour bus ride, I was feeling pretty alone. When we got to the Crisfield docks, we broke up into groups. My group boarded the silver boat piled high with our luggage. The boat moved slowly across the bay toward the island. Most people might think it was a beautiful ride, but the scenery didn't interest me. I was feeling like I didn't belong. When we grew closer to the island, I could see an abandoned and decrepit hunting cabin covered with white seagulls. The cabin's dock had long ago decayed. There were no cars on the island, only bikes and golf carts, which the people who lived there used to make their way over white gravel roads. We walked to the house where we would stay. "You're going to be doing a lot of environmental activities over the next 2 days," our counselors told us. Our first activity was to learn how to catch crabs. We were led back onto the silver boat. Our boat captain held a big brown fish before us. "A brown fish is a favorite of blue crabs," he told us. "If you kiss the fish before you put him in the traps, you'll have a good catch." I gave it a big, passionate kiss. From the looks on some of the kids' faces, I guess that wasn't very cool. Smith Island has lots of crumbling crab shacks. Small boardwalks wander through tall green marsh grasses, past boats and boat workers, and often end at muddy beaches. We followed these walkways so that we could participate in games with environmental themes, such as sharks and minnows. In this case, one group would be the runoff, and another group would be the nutrients. Later, we would choose to be in Maryland River, like the Severn, Chickawacomico, and Pamunkey. I wasn't much into any of this, and was preoccupied with my own thoughts. How was I going to make these popular kids like me? Breakfast the next morning was held in the small room near the kitchen. We were all still in our PJs, and I intentionally sat with the popular kids. I tried to talk about Lady Gaga and Beyonce's song Telephone to one of the most popular boys. He was not interested. After breakfast, we were loaded back into the silver boat for marsh mucking. We got filthy and had to wash ourselves off in the bay. I wanted to be the adventurous, cool kid, so I dramatically dunked my whole head under the blue-green bay water. I don't think any of the right kids cared. That evening, we ventured back to the dock. There weren't many dock lights. The few lights there were cast an orange glow into the pitch-black night. The counselors brought us to a shed at the end of the dock, where the boat captain was now going to show us how to prepare crabs the island way. This meant taking a live crab, ripping its shell off, and then tossing it into a pot of boiling water. I was stunned. All I could think of was how painful that must be for the crab. It sent an aching feeling down my spine. The other kids ate the crabs while the counselors explained that the Smith Island watermen's livelihood were dependent on a healthy bay. I understood that all this was important, but after that kind of inhumanity, I just couldn't eat. I walked outside of the shed into the dark night and crossed over to the other side of the dock. The moon was shining in a way that made bright white fragments of light run across the black and purple water. I sat there for some time before my friend Becky found me. "Why don't you want to eat the crabs?" Becky asked me. I didn't like how they were being treated, I told her, and then asked, "How come you're not eating them?" "I can't eat shellfish. I'm Jewish," she said. Becky sat down next to me on the dock. Bits of the dock's light cast an orange glow over us, brightening just the edge of Becky's face, and I could make out 3 scars that formed a numeral, a 7. I'd known Becky for years, and these scars were familiar to me. But somehow in this light, the scars seemed different. "How did you get those scars on your forehead?" I asked her. "I fell onto the pointed edge of a table when I was little," she said. The scars didn't seem to bother her. She accepted it. It was just a part of her. "I think they're cool," I said. Then I brought up the subject of how the popular kids always treated people who were different as if they didn't exist, or worse. "Why should being different be viewed as a bad thing?" I asked her. Becky simply replied, "There's no such thing as normal, Connor." And when she said this, it seemed like the lights around us became a little brighter, and my mood a little lighter. And there was no place else I wanted to be except with her on this dock, talking into the night. The next day, as the silver boat steered away from the sinking island, my life had been forever changed by Becky's few words. There's no such thing as normal. They are words that still empower me and encourage me to be myself. And I try to encourage others to do the same. I have traveled far and wide, but it was on Smith Island, a place many people don't consider normal. A place not so far from home, that I found what I needed most, an acceptance, an understanding I will carry with me for the rest of my life.
My 20-year-old self once said New York City was overrated and that he'd never visit. My 40-year-old self would like to have a few words with him, relate a few stories, maybe show him a few pictures.
In 1960, things were decidedly more relaxed for a boy of 15. Then I lived in India, while my father worked for the United Nations. During the 3 years we lived there, my parents gave me an amazing degree of freedom to explore my new home. A degree of freedom unimaginable today in the United States, to say nothing of more exotic locations. Even so, when my American friend Van said to me, "Why don't we go to Agra and spend the night and see the Taj Mahal?" I responded, "Just the two of us? My parents will never let me do that." But they did. Van was 17, 2 years older than I. Where I was tall, Van was short. Where I was fair, he was dark. Where I was hesitant, he was outgoing. The September morning of our departure was hot. The monsoon season had just ended, but the humidity lingered. When the conductor opened the gate for the Delhi-Agra Express and yelled, "Sub chalo," Van and I surged forward with the waiting throng to battle for the few seats in the third-class compartment, those being the only seats our limited budget would permit. The more experienced travelers knew what to do. Some bypassed the crowded and overheated compartment and climbed up the ladders at the end of the railway cars to make the journey on the roof of the train. This was more excitement than we dared. Others clambered through the open windows while we headed for the compartment door. By the time we wrestled aboard, the only space available was on the grimy floor by the train's open door, only a few feet away from the foul-smelling lavatory. As the steam engines slammed into the waiting cars, lurching them forward, an itinerant Hindu holy man, sadhu, raced across the platform and extended his arm for an assist to board the moving train. I reached out and grabbed his hand, and he tumbled across us as the train pulled out of the station. Nodding and smiling, he settled in next to us on the floor. He sat cross-legged, his bony brown knees protruding from his dusty saffron robes. He had a scraggly beard, and his hair was long and matted. A tila, a white and red mark was smeared across his forehead, signifying his sect and his piety. The train hurtled along, jostling us from side to side through the open plains of Uttar Pradesh. The wind blew through the door, tousling our hair, cooling us down. Van reached into his pocket and pulled out a packet of cheap, unfiltered Panama cigarettes. As we lit up, the sadhu gestured that he'd appreciate smoke. He acknowledged the cigarette with a slight namaste and a laugh. "Shukriya," he said, "Bahut acha." I smiled, his meaning being clear enough. He smoked the cigarette down to its last inch, popped the smoldering butt into his mouth, chewed it up, and swallowed. We planned our visit to Agra so that after we had a chance to explore the city, we'd arrive at the Taj at 9 in the evening, an hour before the gates closed. This would coincide with the full moon rising over the timeless mausoleum. Back then, seeing the Taj under the moonlight was the highlight of any trip to India. Unfortunately, these days, the Indian government restricts access to the Taj at night and turns off all illumination due to security concerns. In this post-9/11 world, India has its own threats to deal with, whether from Pakistan or China, or from internal groups that fuel violence between Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims. Like the Twin Towers, the Taj Mahal is a prominent target. But back then, rather than being scrutinized at the entrance by heavily armed police and bag checks, only a single sleepy ticket taker and a slouching watchman with a bamboo pole greeted us. It was a mild night with soft, warm breezes, and we explored the shrine and the lush gardens in silence, struck by the peace and serenity in such sharp contrast to the noisy city just outside the gates. As it came time to leave, we found ourselves in a secluded corner, protected from view by a 4-foot hedge. The lawn was lush, and still warm from the day's earlier light. The scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. "Why don't we just sleep here tonight?" Dan said. "Here? You mean at the Taj?" "Yeah. We don't have a hostel room yet. It's warm. The grass is soft. We can save a few rupees. We'll leave in the morning and catch the train back to Delhi as we planned. It'll be fun." They will never let us stay here. Shh. Everything's so loosey-goosey. We had to wake up the ticket taker when we came in. He's probably sound asleep again. They don't know whether we're still here or not. With that, we heard someone calling from the vicinity of the gates. "Bun Karahai, Bun Karahai." I think maybe they know we're still here. "Well, so what," said Van. "They've got to find us in the dark. And if they do, we'll just tell them we didn't realize the place closed, and all we were doing was watching the Taj in the moonlight." That's what everybody talks about, right? The Taj in the moonlight. What's the worst that could happen? So that's what we did. We spent the night at the Taj Mahal. Periodically, I got up to watch the shrine as the moon moved across the sky, until it was replaced by a night full of stars. I could hear the traffic, music, and bustle of the city in the distance, but they were only a faint din, overpowered by the rustling of leaves, stirred by the soft breezes, and by the chirping of crickets. The air smelled clean, freshened by the cool water in the Taj's reflecting pools. I imagine that it must have been on nights like this more than 300 years ago, when Shah Jahan would roam these same gardens and look out upon the monument he had built to celebrate his love for Mumtaz Mahal, his mourned-for wife. Eventually, I heard birds singing and dogs barking in the distance, and a pink glow emerged in the east. The air became pungent with the smoke from the early morning dung fires, brewing chai and warming chapatis. Dan and I watched the sun rise over the mausoleum in the early stillness, the light slowly brightening and changing the hue of the minarets in the dome from pink to red to ochre to saffron to gold to silver and finally to a blazing white. With the morning upon us, we were hungry and ready to leave, but caution dictated we delay our departure until the morning visitors arrived and gave us some cover. We kept out of sight until the gates opened, and a few tour groups filtered into the garden. We mingled in with these early visitors, and after what we thought was a suitable period, made our way to the exit. As we crossed the threshold, an angry guard carrying a bamboo stick stormed out of the office. "Either on them on the high!" Someone had noticed us after all. "Either on them on the high!" With spittle flying from his betel-nut-stained mouth. We feigned ignorance, shrugging our shoulders, claimed we didn't understand. "Either ruko!" he said, pointing at us and at the ground, indicating we were to stay put until he found somebody in authority to bridge the language barrier. When he stepped back into his office, Van and I looked at each other, nodded, and made a mad dash down the street away from the Taj. We heard yelling, but we didn't look back as we turned the corner, running another couple of blocks before slowly slowing down and mixing in with the morning shoppers. We began to relax. Then we were laughing. People walking alongside us on the street smiled. "What would they have done to us?" I asked. "Who knows," Van said. "Probably yelled a lot. Maybe they'd have called our parents. At worst, our folks might have had to come down and spread around a little bucksheesh." And Van was probably right. That likely would have been the extent of it in those years so far removed from today's world of armed guards and metal detectors and suicide bombers and exploding cars and trucks. A world where children are kept indoors and closely supervised, rather than encouraged to explore and to run free. A world where they lock the gates to the Taj Mahal at sunset.
Travel tip. Don't bring a watch to the Caribbean. It will only confuse things.
Travel tip. When traveling with girlfriends of 20 years, pack lightly, be flexible, and expect to be surprised by yourself and them.
Travel tip. Being super cooperative with security agents only makes them think you're hiding something.
In satisfying stories, a character must move from one point to another. It's often a quest, the hero's journey, a story structure that has appeared in every culture since ancient times. There have been endless variations on this mythic journey, but here is what is timeless, what stays true. Your hero must be pulled out of his ordinary world by his yearning for an undeniable outside force. Your hero will encounter mentors, allies, and enemies along the way until he finally faces his supreme ordeal. And don't forget, those enemies need to be both external and internal. Your hero will not always arrive at his expected destination and might not return home, but he will gain self-knowledge, a new awareness, a new worldview. Now, not all heroes need to fight monstrous battles, saving the world from extinction. Maybe your hero has only journeyed to the local Target for a box of diapers. But what happens along the way can make even the simplest journey a hero's journey. And in life story writing, the hero is you.
During a sunset horseback ride on the beach, I met Juan Carlos. It was a moment that took my breath away. Then, during one of our first conversations, after I shared how stressful my life in America was, he asked me why I stay in a place where I wasn't happy. I immediately defended the details. It's my home, my career, my family, my life. I challenged him. Why do you stay here? He paused, looked at me with sincerity. Because I can't go anywhere else. You have the freedom to stop what's not working for you. He was right. I resigned from my job, from graduate school, and ended the lease on my house. I was willing to let go of everything I had, including my much-loved career, for a chance of something greater. What I didn't know when I boarded that one-way flight to the Dominican Republic was that my life's work would follow me. I had been living on the island for only a few days when I visited Juan Carlos's family village, 20 minutes from the pristine white sands of Punta Cana. The shack was simple, corrugated metal sheets around and on top of a skeletal wooden frame. A curtain divided the two areas we would call rooms. Suddenly, a young girl appeared in the doorway. "This is my sister," Juan Carlos said with ease as he said everything. "She has a little problem," he added. I felt a rush of both shock and pure comfort. Everything in the Dominican was foreign to me, from the language to the food, but she and her problem was something I recognized. "Her name is Joa," Juan Carlos continued. Joa was slender, with medium brown skin. Her hair that had likely started in the morning as several neat braids was now frayed. Her eyes, which slanted up slightly, glowed as she looked at me, a new visitor. With smiles and excitement, Joa unloaded a handful of broken toys on the wooden table in front of me. There was no question in her mind. She knew I had arrived to play with her. I knew she had Down syndrome. "¿Qué pasa con este?" she asked me, while holding up a broken arm of a doll. I smiled because I did not yet understand Spanish. "¿Qué pasa con este?" she repeated, looking at me. Again, I smiled and picked up another broken part, indicated I was interested, but I couldn't talk about it. She accepted this and moved on with enthusiasm. Joa was 11 years old. No one in the village knew what her little problem was. The knowledge simply hadn't reached them. Teachers sent her home from school. Since she looked and acted different, they assumed she couldn't learn. So the village raised her. When her mother had to go to work, others looked after Joa. When she wandered too far in the evening, they sent her home for dinner. They treated her much like everyone else, with a little extra love and attention. Joa had responsibilities. She retrieved water for cooking, washed dishes, and took care of her basic needs. She was pleased with the simplest of tasks. Every time I visited the dusty village, Joa and I would take walks together, where she would always discover treasures along the dirt paths, scraps of metal from building efforts or pieces of nature, leaves and twigs. Each were something special to Joa. She taught me developing world essentials, like how to flush a toilet without running water. During birthday parties and other special occasions, she would take my hands and twirl me under the stars to bachata music. She danced as though the world was playing music just for her. And for a few moments, I too experienced the pure joy and abandon that was Joa's reality. My life in the Dominican Republic took several turns, one of them away from Juan Carlos. Joa's life continued on much simpler than mine. She kept being content and in awe over new visitors and broken toys. Joa was a highlight of my first adventure abroad, and still, when I think of her, after all these years later, I imagine twirling under the stars with her, with joyful abandon and a happy heart.
If I can help somebody as I am alone, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody that they're traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. When I think of home, I think of a place where there's love overflowing. I wish I was home, I wish I was back there with the things I've been knowing. When that makes the tall trees bend into leaning, suddenly the raindrops that fall have a meaning, sprinkling the sea, makes it all clean. Maybe there's a chance for me to go back there, now that I have some direction. It would sure be nice to be back home, where there's love and affection, and just maybe I can convince her to soar, giving me enough time in my life to grow up. Time, be my friend. let me start again.
What is that feeling when you're driving away from people and they recede on the plain till you see their specks dispersing? It's the too huge world vaulting us, and it's goodbye. But we lean forward to the next crazy venture beneath the skies. Jack Kerouac, On the Road. We can choose to depart, or we can be pushed out. Maybe you did not leave willingly. Perhaps the army transferred you for the 8th time, or you fled from religious persecution and your war-torn country. Did your family farmhouse burn to ashes? Were you forced to evacuate when a ferocious hurricane demolished everything you owned? What pulled you away from what you knew? What tugs at your heart, asking for your return? What did you leave behind?
When I left for a year of study at a Quaker center in Pennsylvania, I left behind 40 years of accumulation and belongings and memories.
When I flew to France on a student exchange at age 14, I left my mother tongue.
I left behind the feeling that I was waiting for my real life to begin.
A kitchen warmed by the big wood stove on a cold night, fall harvest and spring plowing, melon patches, brown hen eggs, and homemade watermelon preserves.
When I went to the Caribbean, I left a man who would have given me anything to stay.
When I first went to Paris at age 8, I left behind Velveeta for good.
Travel means living in a strange place till it feels like you belong, then coming home to a place you no longer recognize.
And there are times when we are not the traveler, when we are the one left behind. It's then that we need to find a new way of being in the world without you.
Mom's ashes were in a square box. Although the last time I saw her alive, and beginning her slow float toward death, she seemed impossibly small. Her body shrunken, her bones beneath thin, translucent skin, fragile, bird-like under my touch. I was shocked by the little box that now held her remains. For the memorial service, my brother had bought an attractive ceramic piece to serve as an urn, but none of us could figure out how to transfer the ashes into the urn without losing some of Mom. So now we were stuck with an ordinary, ungraceful box, reminiscent of something that might hold a gadget from Best Buy. We wanted to put Mom's ashes beside a picture of her younger, more vibrant self on a table near the altar at St. Luke's by the Sea, where she and Dad had happily worshipped. The ugly box problem was solved by a fitted cloth designed by the church for just such a moment. As the little wooden church filled with family and friends, I was surprised at how a large life could be reduced into such a tiny space now that the journey was over. How big a threshold this box represented, moving into a mystery too immense to name. I gathered myself together in order to give the eulogy I'd written, an outline of which I read to Mom when she was planning this service. She had approved. Now, shaking outwardly, but steady at the core, in a way I didn't think possible, I was ready to deliver it. After the service and the reception, where we enjoyed food prepared by Mom's friends, we gathered at the beach at sunset to scatter her ashes into the thundering Pacific. Unplanned and unscripted, people spoke from full hearts. As Ernulf, my exchange student Norwegian brother, stripped down to his shorts and ran barefoot into the cold, outgoing tide to send our mother into the ocean's vastness. Ron, the silver-haired caretaker whose gentle presence had allowed Mom and Dad to live in their own home longer than they might have, said his years with our parents were the best years of his life. My shy Chinese college roommate had become their adopted daughter. She had been married in our home and had asked my parents to name her newborn sons. On the beach that evening, she said, "This is for Mom," and read Tennyson's Crossing the Bar. My sister Janie, once estranged from Mom, but reunited because of their mutual integrity and capacity for forgiveness, simply said, "I love you, Mom. I am grateful for your life." And I shared Mary Oliver's When Death Comes, which captured Mom's fiercely wondrous commitment to life. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. With the day fading, pink-tinged, mercury silver light reflected in wet sand, and the first stars emerging above us, the priest cried into the ocean's roar, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." My heart brimmed with the echo of Mom's traditional farewell to us as we left her for school. "And make his face to shine upon you, dear hearts," she would cry in her southern drawl. Spent yet full, we walked back to the beach house, sharing stories about Mom and her gifts to our lives, and enjoying our connection to each other. When all had left, I was alone with the sound of an ancient ocean, a sky full of stars, an ache of gratitude, and a longing I still would like to understand. How can I embrace what is to come and live in the present with curiosity and joy? What does it take to risk being fully present? What does it mean to be fearless? I long to know. I thought at age 73 I'd have more answers. Instead, I seem only to know how to ask better questions.
Travel tip. Never order Jameson whiskey in the north of Ireland or Bushmills in the south unless you like fighting. I learned that from a poet.
Travel tip. Under no circumstances should you enter the laboratory, bus, train, or plane in your socks.
Travel tip. It's hard to see people from different places and from foreign cultures as different after you've shared a meal.
At the unclaimed baggage shop in Scottsboro, Alabama, women who aren't ashamed buy what's lost in the heavens. Shoes stamped with the memory of feet, dreams of houses stenciled in blue ink, rings that never get to be married, red suitcases with nothing inside. Sometimes a scuffle starts over a prayer shawl or a child's dress. A voice awakens to pain, then the quiet mends itself back. In one dust-splotched corner, wishbone crutches hang from a pegboard. Wheelchairs in stacks, their leather backs so very straight. There's a case of false arms, each laid palm up, palm open, as if to receive a handshake or a piece of bread. No one ever comes to claim those, the clerk admits. No one ever comes. I see them in airports, rising from seats marked with the sign of the lane, and stepping through glass doors that part of their own accord.
Aunt Sally told me they called Daddy Tap Dancing Charlie. He won every contest, she said, from the Sugar Shack at Cuffy's to the Cars Beach Club. He danced at Blake's Field on wooden crates, smack in the middle of the Hot Sox baseball diamond. Up on the high ground, they called him Jitterbug. Down on the low ground, they yelled, "Go Stagger Lee, go Stagger Lee." Sometimes there was a band, and sometimes they spun those big records, but the story was always the same. Daddy clicked out those steps in neat sets of triplets and crossbacks. Then he'd throw his body up in a ball on the balls of his feet and rock back and forth like a cool breeze, as the heat from the humid summer night on the dusty ball field drenched him with sweat and made his dog face shine like glass. The flat-footed, zoot-suited Dallas boy from Owensville, Maryland, catwalk and tap to a beat that could only be described as spiritual. Who could touch him now as he jumped and leaped and leaned backwards on the board? Tap, 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 dance, Charlie, dance. Tapping in rhythmic beats on his toes. And so he tapped on and on and on into the night and sometimes into the new day. But then the morning came and it was time to go back into the fields. He won the grand prize, Aunt Sally's chocolate cake. But the old zoot suit came off, and the worn patch overall pants went back on. Yes, he won the contest, but reality struck at him again, as it always did. He would never go beyond tobacco fields. He would never continue on to bigger contests, bigger events, bigger towns. His dance would always end here. I guess for him, the memories were too much to share, even with me. Aunt Sally said he was the greatest dancer, but she said he was great during the wrong time. In another time, he would have become famous. The joy he gave those onlookers as he danced, who probably were just as downtrodden as he was, did make him the greatest. So I guess his dancing was meant for them in their time. And no wonder it was too much for him to share.
I knew a man, Bojangles, and he danced for you in worn-out shoes, silver hair, ragged shirt, and baggy pants. He'd do the old soft shoe. He could jump so high, so high. And then he'd lightly touch down. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles,
What's worth writing about? With so many memories in us, how do we recognize the life story worth telling? You'll want to look for those pivotal moments that changed your direction. What made a difference? When was it that you found your way? Many people feel that their lives are too mundane to write about, and maybe you have not surfed 40-foot waves on the north shore of Oahu, wrestled with alligators in a Florida swamp, or sailed the Spice Islands. The fact that your mother piled 6 kids into a station wagon bound for an afternoon at the beach can be just as compelling as any grand circumstance.
On the other side of the world, at nearly the same position closely above the equator as the Dominican Republic, I landed in Thailand. My first trip had been one way. This time, it was a round-trip flight. The mission was teaching English. The job provided a way for me to continue to travel. As we walked outside of the airport in the southern city of Surat Thani, the intense humidity smacked my face and filled my lungs. Peter, the owner of the Super English Language School, drove me to what would be my home for the next year. A wide sidewalk, almost a road itself, separated the street from a row of large sliding metal doors. He handed me the keys to one of these storage-looking units, common city homes in this region of Thailand. Inside was an enormous room with a single table and chairs and a small refrigerator. There was no kitchen. "You'll eat your meals out," Peter offered as an explanation. All I could think of was, "Dorothy, you're not in paradise anymore." After a couple of days of jet lag and stomaching new smells like curries and dried fish, I received my teaching assignments. I would teach at 2 different Thai schools and would navigate the city streets between them by bicycle. My students were 3, 4, and 5 years old, 50 in each class. I started my first day at the yellow school with blue trim. As the only foreign teacher, I was asked to greet the children as they arrived. This tradition required me to smile and gently bow to the parents as they smiled and bowed in return. This routine exchange was interrupted when a pickup truck drove up to the drop-off location. In the open bed of the truck, on a straw mat, next to his grandmother, was Mai, a 4-year-old boy. He nervously made screeching noises as he clung to a bottle of milk. His demeanor and lack of eye contact immediately revealed the truth to me. He had autism. In the Dominican, Joa was sent home from school. Here, in Surat Thani, Mai was at least getting to attend school, though that was the extent of his education. Mai sat in a corner. No one paid any attention to him. I don't speak Thai, so I gestured to a Thai teacher, attempting to ask her the plan for Mai. She waved her hands back at me and shook her head. "Maru," she told me, "Maru." I understood. No plan. There was no plan. Autism is a whole different situation than Down syndrome, and Thailand is almost the complete contrasting culture from the Caribbean island where I had met Joa. Mai didn't have a village raising him. His community didn't support his family, they judged him. What would happen to him? How would he make his way in this world? This young boy touched my heart, and I knew I was faced with a responsibility far greater than teaching English. I had found myself in Thailand, and the reason was now clear to me. I was there for mine.
Travel tip. Hide money in your socks. You never know what might happen.
Travel tip. Never get the beef entree on United, the chicken entree on Delta, or the vegetable medley on anything with wings.
Travel tip. If you need a driver in India, hire one who's young, so he'll be aggressive enough to negotiate the chaotic traffic. Yet, one with a family, so he'll be cautious enough to actually get you to your destination.
Some days, life comes at you fast and hard. One minute, I was making corn pudding for Thanksgiving. And the next minute, I was cradling my 6-foot, 200-pound son as he fell across my kitchen table, his tears flowing. He was in a bad way, this boy of mine, and I never saw it coming. He cried out to me, "Mama, all I ever wanted was a wife who loved me and children. Did I ask for too much?" I remember when the nurse brought him to me from the hospital nursery. I could have sworn that look in her eyes said she didn't trust me to take care of my baby boy. As she put him in my arms, she said, "You need to take special care of this little one. He needs to be kept snug and warm." There was something special about my boy that could not be explained with words. Auntie said it best when she said, "Rob came into this world already grown." My Rob wanted everything life had to offer, but at the speed of lightning. I wondered what my granddaddy would have thought of my boy. Would my gentle son have belonged on the farm? My boy tried everything to make his marriage work, but nothing seemed to work. His new bride had left him several weeks ago, and he never said a word to me. The complete breakdown on my kitchen table over the corn and grated nutmeg caught me by surprise. How had he managed to hide it from me so long? His mother, the one who swore to protect him from all harm. Just before we left for the wedding, I told Rob that it was not too late to change his mind. He was furious with me. That look he gave me was worse than the look he gave me when his best friend, Fat Ollie, stole his bike. Now, here he was crying all over my kitchen table. I wish I could say this was the worst of it. But his next words struck me like lightning. He said he almost did it. He said, "It took me a long moment to take it in. What do you mean?" I asked. I heard what he said, but the words didn't make sense to me. My son would never talk like this. He said, "Mom, I almost jumped off the Bay Bridge." They say no one really knows your heart. Rob had put up a very good front. I thought about how hard it must have been for him to pretend. Finally, he took hold of himself, and I watched him as he made his way to his old bedroom and sank into a very deep sleep. I watched my boy for a long time. But then I made my way back into the kitchen to proceed with the fixings of our Thanksgiving dinner. I needed to feel some sense of normalcy. I needed to make stuffing and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie. I wanted to make mashed potatoes and make candy yams with marshmallows. Then I began to cry. I cried as I mashed the potatoes. I cried all over the sink. And I cried as I put that turkey into the oven. But when I grabbed the old rolling pin my mother and her mother before her had used, I wondered how many tears they had shed over their children. I wondered about the many, many Thanksgiving dinners they made, knowing that all was not right with their child. My grandmothers had sons at war, and in countries with names they could barely pronounce. Yet they carried on, not knowing if they would ever see them again. My brother Joe died in a car accident at the age of 25 after he moved away from Mill Swamp. The pain was in my mother's eyes, but the feast was prepared and we still gave thanks. When my son awakened, we cried together. It was in this moment that I realized how strong I must always appear. Just like my grandmother and my mother, I knew I must always play the part. We will gather around my table this Thanksgiving with my son, my daughter, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchild, as always. We will pass around the turkey and the pumpkin pie, just as my mother and my grandmothers before them did. I will put a smile on my face as we give thanks and sing, "Bless this house, O Lord, we pray, keep it safe, both night and day."
Bless us all that someday we'll dwell alone with thee.
As travelers, we often have no idea where we are going, how we will get there, or what we will find. The same is true when you come before the blank page. E.O. Doctorow says, writing a book is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights go, but you can make the whole trip that way.
Transylvania College, the international school in northern Romania, arranged my flight. I was to serve as a guest consultant at a recreational camp in the majestic mountains of Transylvania. During the steep, windy road up to the campsite, the minivan had to pull over. Mara, a camper, was feeling motion sickness. She was 14 years old. Mara is a musical prodigy, one of the organizers of the group shared with me. She also had Asperger's syndrome, a higher functioning form of autism. Like most, I was fascinated with Mara. Her vocabulary far exceeded her age. She offered unique insights, and she did have a natural ability for music. After 2 days at the rustic campsite, Mara pleaded that her mother deliver her most valued possession, her electronic keyboard. She couldn't do without it. Mara plays roughly 85 songs by ear on the keyboard and has a perfect pitch. Pick a number between 1 and 85, she challenged me in her perfect English. I'll play that song from my list. She also composes music for multiple instruments. Mara hears a symphony in her head and writes down the notes. By the time her keyboard arrived, Mara had already composed a new song. She performed it during our talent show, boldly singing a song she titled Being Me. But this delightful young woman doesn't know her left from her right. She gets lost walking around the block. She will stay in a bathroom for up to an hour, if not given a reminder to come out. Though a genius when it comes to music, Mara lacks the skills to be able to live independently. This is a common plight for individuals with special needs all over the world. Joa, Mai, and Mara are just a few of the many children who have inspired Special Travelers, my latest effort to respond to the growing needs of these individuals both home and abroad. With greater understanding of who they are, we can better see what they need. Perhaps the same is true for all of us. I had to travel to discover who I was, and the journey continues. The words that Mara first shared with me on that mountaintop in Romania come back to me. I find it a pity that most people don't use their natural ability to empathize with others, she said. I have to work so hard at it. Mara was right. We are often not as caring for each other as we can be. And for any of us to not use our natural gifts, whatever they may be, is a misfortune. While Mara may not have the natural abilities that many of us take for granted, she does understand this. We must live the story that is true for us.
How do you want to tell who you are? And whom do you want to tell it to? Your family? A wider audience? Is your writing best suited for a private journal? Or is it a story, memoir, novel, or a poem? And what will be lost if you don't reveal what matters most? Are there those who might learn from your mistakes and struggles? Are there those who might be inspired by your triumphs and happiness, by your hard-won wisdom? What are you willing to share?
When my husband Clay booked us on consecutive flights from Washington, D.C. to Dunedin, New Zealand, with the idea that we could make an international connection in San Francisco with only a 90-minute layover, there were more issues at stake than the fact that this kind of ticket has, I'm just asking for it, stamped under time of departure. 6 weeks before making this reservation, our son Andrew, whom we had not seen in over a year, had watched his own baby boy be born limp and lifeless, unable to breathe. Clay and I had not been there to support Andrew because the hospital where this event occurred is 13,000 miles away, on the bottom of New Zealand's South Island, where Andrew lives. Andrew experienced the birth of his first child like a passenger surviving a car accident, a little stunned at the violence, relieved that those most grievously injured had been resuscitated, and ultimately euphoric that he now held in his arms a healthy baby boy. Clay and I work. We don't have a lot of money and time to take extra days off and spend money on hotels. So we did have to make the 26,000-mile trip as efficiently as possible. But sure enough, our plane is delayed exactly 90 minutes. And even as I'm texting Andrew, still on the ground at Dulles, going to miss connection in San Fran, Clay turns to me and says, "We can make it." Clay and I are, in fact, sun to cloud. He would assure you that your lab results will be perfect, Well, I'm wondering if you've chosen an executor for your estate. He would tell you that dark energy and gravity hold the universe in perfect balance. Well, I would remind you there is a voracious black hole at the center of the Milky Way. Our conflicting paradigms make me want to write meaningful haikus like a 7th grader. Haiku poems reflect a spiritual truth by evoking an image from nature. They're traditionally 5 syllables, followed by 7 syllables, then 5. Here's an example by haiku master Natsumi Soseki. Chrome has flown away, swaying in the evening sun, a leafless tree. And here's mine, which I have titled, Clay Makes the Reservations. Plane delayed, plans, run. Next flight leaving now, too late, gone, like hop on wing. I have a less evocative version as well. Optimus books flights as if planes take off on time. Misconnection, books. 5 hours after finally taking off from Dulles, we're taxiing in on the runway in San Francisco at the exact departure time for our next flight, which, from the airport map, appears to be 22 miles of concourse away and in another hub of the airport. Our son is going to be standing at an airport gate in New Zealand, holding a baby we've never seen, waiting for parents who never arrive. Our scant time together just lost an entire day. I'm so disappointed, I can hardly breathe. And Clay repeats, we can make it, scrambling to get our luggage from the overhead compartment. We've been told that because the plane was delayed, a representative for our carrier will meet us at the top of the jetway. It's going to facilitate international connections, implying that if our plane isn't already in the air, just maybe an official can still get us on our flight. Grateful and encouraged, we squeeze past the other passengers, race up the ramp, but the promised guide isn't there. We can make it anyway, Clay says. We hit the concourse at a dead run. We have to get to gate 52A, and we're not even in the international terminal. I'm now jogging with 25 pounds of carry-on luggage in my arms, which is a lot like running holding a toddler who's trying to get down. We weave through milling throngs, outpace the moving sidewalks. My calves burn, my arms ache. We sprint up escalators because they're too slow. We slip through groups of reuniting friends just before they reach each other, the way fugitives blast through barricades at railroad crossings seconds before. I've lost all sense of social protocol. Instead of calling out, excuse me, please, I've been calling out, for God's sake, get out of my way. We run at least a mile. I'm only at gate 43B. I know the flight attendants have sealed the doors. I know it's pointless to persevere when the goal was impossible from the beginning. We can make it, Clay calls out over his shoulder. We have been married 39 years, together for 42. There have been times when I wondered if the person you chose to spend your life with, when you were still an adolescent, could possibly be the right choice. Our kids are waiting a lot longer before making this kind of commitment, and they're doing so as fully formed adults, independent and whole. I was neither. They're not plagued by doubt, by what if. What if I stayed married because I'm lazy, cowardly, unimaginative? What if I'm supposed to be living an entirely different life with a different man? What if, at 19, I boarded the wrong plane? We can make it, Clay says, but I'm pretty cranky by now, and I'm thinking, yeah, make it yourself, mister. I don't even think I want to to anymore. Aren't you the one responsible for this mess with your stupid optimism? Well, mine's gone. Like hawk on wing. We're running down a nearly empty concourse. Most gates closed for the night. When I hear my name called over the public address system, look up and see gate 52A. 2 cheering agents have positioned themselves sideways, arms extended, to snag our boarding passes, as if we're exchanging batons in a relay race. Another 50 feet down the jetway, and we bound onto the waiting plane and collapse. The cabin door closes with a soft shushing of bump. Plane rocks back, and the world outside the window slips slowly past, but I can no longer tell who is moving. 2 careful turns, the engines power up, the lights dim, and the plane begins the race for ascent. For the next 13 hours, someone else will be in charge of my fate as we fly from the northern hemisphere towards this land of the Southern Cross, where today is already tomorrow, where spring is fall, where there's a waterfall that flows upwards, they say, where there waits a son I sorely miss, and a tiny grandson I've never met. Beside me, there's only radiant affirmation that expecting the best is the only way to live. That the universe is a place of abundance if you allow it. I can't even look at clay yet. It's as if there's a boy inside who's never been hurt or born in injustice, except I know that's not true. He just assumes the inherent worth of each of us, which makes him never question that goodness is our lot, that things work out given half a chance, that all that was ever planned for you was joy. I can't tell you how attractive this is. I think it's the force holding the stars apart.
I believe the greatest gift I can give you is my story.
I give you my story.
Perhaps my adventures will inspire you.
For you, I put our story on the page.
And if I give these words a voice,
Say the words and sentences and paragraphs out loud for all to hear.
Maybe my poems will travel out into the world.
Maybe your story is the force holding the stars apart.
Marcel Proust wrote, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." So I ask you, what part of your journey will you capture on the page?
Boulder Junction, Louisville, Belfast.
Chiang Mai, Sydney, Paris,
Auckland, Bozeman, Vostok,
Shangri-La, Rio, Alligator Point.
Paris, Baton Rouge, Narragansett,
Memphis, Port-au-Prince, Florence,
Annapolis, Holland, Detroit,
Call